Hi everyone, my name is Marla and this is a video teaching going along with the website injesusname.net. If you like the video, please go over there and subscribe for free so I can send you all the videos and the blog posts sent directly to your email inbox as I teach through the Bible cover to cover. For today's video, I hope it's going to bless you because it's on one of the most amazing books in your Bible, the book of Daniel. So chock full of prophecies that are just fascinating. It's almost hard to decide what to teach on. And so for today's teaching, I just decided to start at the beginning pretty well and just give you a little bit of an insight into Daniel himself through teaching through one of the chapters in Daniel, the chapter 2, which is one of his very first visions, and you're going to get tons and tons of information about Daniel just from this little chapter. So I'm going to read it and talk as I go, and this is one of the rare times I'm actually going to go verse for verse through a chapter of the Bible because there's so much in here that you can glean about Daniel. I'm just going to not skip anything pretty much. All right, so let's read in chapter 2 of Daniel, and we're going to find out about the man Daniel himself. And I'll just start, even before I read, just by saying that Daniel is writing all of this from Babylon. He was a young man when he wrote what we're going to read, and he was taken into captivity into Babylon when he was probably 12 or 14. What has happened is there's been some sieges on Jerusalem. That's where Daniel is from. And in the very first siege, which was done by Nebuchadnezzar, before he was even king, Daniel and his friends were taken into captivity. So Nebuchadnezzar was actually coming back from a different skirmish. It was called the Battle of Carchemish. It's very famous. It was against Egypt. Babylon destroyed Egypt at this battle. And Nebuchadnezzar is on his way back. He's not yet king of Babylon. His dad is king. And as he's on his way back, he decides to just invade Jerusalem because it's on the way. And he succeeds. And Jerusalem is besieged. And meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar gets word that his dad dies, sick and dying. And so Nebuchadnezzar can't dwell. And that's a good thing because Jerusalem isn't completely demolished. The temple is still standing. And Nebuchadnezzar puts in place Jerusalem as a vassal state, Judah as a vassal state, which means they're just going to pay homage to Babylon to stay in existence, pay taxes. And he's going to set up his own governor there. But meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar takes with him some of the brightest young men, some of the people of royal lineage. He takes them along with him to Babylon, which was a wise strategy because he's going to kind of knock the culture out of them. And meanwhile, he's going to get the best of their knowledge. He's going to use them in his own kingdom. He's going to train them up in the ways of Babylon, and he's going to integrate his culture into their culture. And it's just a very wise strategy. So that's when Daniel was taken in this first siege of Jerusalem, taken away to Babylon along with his 3 friends. And we see the book, this chapter 2, written in the 2nd year of now King Nebuchadnezzar because his dad has died. So let's read in chapter 2, verse 1, and we'll just start finding out about Daniel. In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we shall show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, now that's just a general blanket name now for sorcerers, enchanters, the magicians. We're just going to know them as Chaldeans. So then the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid to ruin. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation. Now, here we see a little bit about King Nebuchadnezzar, young King Nebuchadnezzar. These Chaldeans, these sorcerers, magicians, they have been held over as advisors from his dad's court. And so here Nebuchadnezzar is wise. Now, the dream is bothering him, but he's wise enough to say to these guys, I'm not going to tell you the dream so that you can interpret it. You tell me both the dream and the interpretation, and in that way, I'm going to know if you're the real deal, and I will keep you on. Otherwise, if you don't do it, then, you're done, and your houses are done. And so Nebuchadnezzar is weeding out the bad people here, and he's firm, and you can see he's a despot. What he says goes. He's a tyrant. All right, so this is the situation these Chaldeans are in. So verse 7, we see them say, they answered a second time and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. Nebuchadnezzar the king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you, death. Okay. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. So Nebuchadnezzar's not budging. He says, I know that you're just trying to stall, and you're going to lie to me until that time period runs out. And so I'm not believing. You got to tell me the dream and the interpretation, and that way I'll know you're the real deal. Verse 10, the Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or any chanter or Chaldean. He's saying, no king before you has ever done this. So they've been held over here for a while for many kings who I guess the other kings have not asked very much of them, but they're not happy that they're being asked this task. Verse 11, the thing the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Well, there's something they got right. There is no man who can do this. There's only one that can do this, and it's not the gods, the made-up gods, because I'm sure they've been asking the gods, and they have just been lying. They're fake gods. But God, capital G God, can do this, as we're going to see as we continue reading. But they are stalling, and Nebuchadnezzar's not having it. So, verse 12, because of this, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So he sees right through them, and no, they're not getting this chance. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. So here you have a first little clue about Daniel. He was thought of as one of these wise men. He was part of this group who could do prophecy or was very wise. Now, like I said, they took the wise young men out of Judah, so it's not surprising that he was wise, that he was learned. But here we're seeing a little hint to the fact that he has some gift of prophecy, and he's lumped in with these Chaldeans. So we see they're searching for Daniel to kill him and his companions. So 14, then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion, more of Daniel's gifts, to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Daniel, declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him time, that he might show the interpretation to the king. So Daniel boldly says, I need a little time. And there's something about Daniel that persuades the king, maybe through Arioch, we're not sure, to give him just a little bit of time, where he didn't give the other guys time. So perhaps Daniel's already, his reputation has gone before him, something in his way persuaded the king, but he gets a little time to do what he says, which is he's going to show him the dream and the interpretation. Verse 17, then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. These were the guys that were taken from Jerusalem with him into captivity. 18, he told them to seek mercy from God, the God of heaven, concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So what does Daniel do first after he gets this little bit of time? He goes to his friends and he asks them to pray. So this tells you a ton about Daniel right here. And we're going to see this all through the book of Daniel. He is a man of prayer, and his first thought is ask God for help and get his friends, and we're all going to pray together. So that tells you lots about Daniel's heart and how he wants to save his friends, and he's going to ask for God to do a miracle of mercy through giving them the interpretation. So verse 19, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, so I'm not going to read the rest, but verse 20 through 23 is a prayer of thanks to God. So God gives Daniel the interpretation in the night. And what does Daniel do immediately? But he says a prayer of thanks to God. He gives God all the credit for this. He gives God the credit for giving him these gifts of prophecies and visions. And he also says we and us. He includes his friends in the prayer of thanks. So here we see again, Daniel, his go-to is God. When God does something great, he thanks God immediately. So this is the heart of Daniel. Now, something you got to know about Daniel before I keep going is Daniel is often kind of put in the same realm as Joseph, because as you read about Daniel, you're going to see that there's nothing bad ever said about Daniel. He never any kind of chink in his armor. And it was the same as Joseph. He was all along, he was just sort of obedient and following God. And so Daniel and Joseph are sort of on parallel here in that they have this heart for other people and for God, and there's no really chinks in their armor as far as you can point to and say, they did this wrong. Doesn't mean there weren't men who sinned, but they're very similar in this, and we're going to see more about their similarities as we continue on. Clearly already you see that Daniel and Joseph could both interpret dreams, so there's a similarity there. Let's continue on, verse 24. Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. So here again is Daniel's heart. He's going to save all the wise men, not just his buddies, but he's going to save all these pagan cultists, sorcerers, magicians, along with him. So he is doing a great service to them. Instead of saying, only save me and my buddies, no, say, be kind to everybody because I have the interpretation. Verse 25, then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. Nice of Arioch to take the credit for finding Daniel, but that's pride for you. But anyway, verse 26, the king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar. Now here we see Daniel's name changed to a Babylonian name, which was part of that cultural integration. He says, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Now listen to Daniel's response. Verse 27, Daniel answered the king and said, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or astrologer can show the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions in your head as you lay in your bed are these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be. But as for me, the mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, that you might know the thoughts of your mind. Here, amazing thing. Daniel, see his heart. He's not going to take the credit. He gives all the credit to God. But aside from that, he's already kind of steering Nebuchadnezzar to the thought that the God, our God, my God can do this. No man can do this, but my God can do this. And he's doing this for you, Nebuchadnezzar, because he cares for you. He wants you to know what's going to happen in the latter times. That's why God revealed this vision to me, so that you can know what's going to happen. So isn't it amazing, Daniel? He knows how to steer people to the fact that God cares for them. He's trying to show Nebuchadnezzar that this is a caring God that wants to show him the future. And isn't that an amazing testimony to how to witness to non-believers? It's show them how God is working in their lives to try to steer them towards himself. So now we're going to get the interpretation of the dream. In verse 31, you saw, O king, and behold, a great image, this mighty and exceeding brightness, stood before you in its appearance. It was frightening and its appearance was frightening. Sorry. The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and its arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So there's the dream. A giant statue. The head was gold, the chest and arms silver, the midsection bronze, the legs iron, and then the feet iron and clay. And then out of no human hands, a stone is carved out, and it strikes this statue in the feet, and the whole thing crumbles. That is the dream. Now the interpretation. Verse 36. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. He gives his friends credit. Isn't that cute? 37. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the might, the glory, and into whose hand he has given, wherever they dwelt, the children of man, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them. You are the head of gold. So Daniel is doing right again. He's telling Nebuchadnezzar that God has made him the head. He has given him all these lands and all the beasts and all that. So he's saying, God put you in control. You're the head of gold. And in verse 39, another kingdom inferior to you shall rise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks into pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush these. As you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix clay. Now, I'm just going to stop there to give you more of what this means. So you're seeing that Daniel has said the head is Nebuchadnezzar. That's the Babylonian Empire. Now he says under them in the latter times are going to be these other empires. And first you have the one represented by silver. So you must know that after the Babylonian Empire collapsed, you had the Persians come and take them over. So Babylon reigned from 606 to 539 BC. And as we studied, Persia comes after them, and they rule from 539 to 332 BC. Next after the Persian Empire, the Greek Empire takes over. They rule from 332 to 68 BC. This is represented by the bronze. Next, you see the Roman Empire takes over after Greece. From 68 BC to about 476 AD is when things start to divide, and nobody conquers the Roman Empire. It just sort of crumbles, and really the Roman Empire was never defeated. It just became all these different countries in Europe and the Byzantine area. So this is the statue. The exact amount of empires that came after Babylon is represented in the statue by these different metals. And what's fascinating, if you saw in verse 40, in talking about the iron, it says, and there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. So the Roman Empire, it was known to crush and trample. And these other empires, like I was talking about before, Babylon, Persia, Greek, they were cultural empires. They built culture. They integrated different cultures together. They were all about arts and culture. That was their their modus operandi. That is how they ruled the world. They integrated culture into culture. That's different from Rome. As we read in our New Testament how Rome was, they just crushed like iron. They trampled over. They were not about building culture. They were about overthrowing. And so it's interesting that the text says that this iron empire is going to do just that, and that is what Rome does. So as we read on, there's more to the dream. Remember the stone. So let's keep reading verse 44. And in the days of those kings, the days when everything, when Rome too, when the iron and clay, that part of this statue, when that's going on, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, a great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So Daniel is saying, a great God has shown you the far future when this stone is going to be cut out of a mountain by no human hands, and it's going to dash all the empires of the world to pieces. That is a foreshadow to the time when Jesus comes, the time when Europe is blended, the Roman Empire is still there, it's just shattered and scattered. Jesus is going to come, a stone cut from no human hands is going to come and hit the feet, and the whole thing is going to come down. And that stone is going to turn into a mountain, and it's going to spread on the earth, and that kingdom ruled by that stone is going to rule forever and ever. Now, if you've been studying the New Testament, you know all the verses out there that talk about Jesus being the cornerstone, the stumbling block, the rock. That's all about Jesus. So here we have, way back here in 603 BC, a vision about Jesus coming to be the stone that crumbles all the nations and rules on the earth forever. Amazing, right? And the detail about all the different empires that follow after the Babylonian Empire. What are the chances that the exact amount of empires rule before Jesus comes and takes over? So it's amazing and fascinating, but there's more here to see. If you keep going in verse 46, then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel and commanded that an offering and incense be offered to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, truly your God is God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king that he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained in the king's court. So here you see Nebuchadnezzar declares that our God is God over gods because he gave the dream and the interpretation. So he gets the point. This wasn't Daniel that did it. It was God. But meanwhile, he raises Daniel up to this high level over his province there in Babylon, just like we saw with Joseph. Same thing, right? Joseph is risen up in the court of Egypt. Here's Daniel doing the same thing. He's rising up. Here's Daniel, who asks that his friends also come along with him to be rulers. The names there, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, those are the Babylonian names of his three companions that had Jewish names earlier on. And then something amazing you need to reread here. In verse 48, then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Now, something you need to know that is fascinating. Because of this, many people think that the wise men that came from the east at the time of Jesus' birth knew to look for the star because that's prophecy of the coming of the Messiah. They knew to look for the star because Daniel, way back here, was made the head of all the wise men. He was made the head of all the enchanters and the horoscope people and all that. Daniel was the one that was teaching them. And what do you think Daniel was teaching them? But Jewish history and what to look for when the Jewish Messiah comes, because that's all prophesied not only by Daniel, as you see right here in the text when he's talking about the rock coming to destroy the nations, but many of the other prophets. So here is Daniel, head over these wise men, and centuries later, the wise men come looking for King Jesus. Amazing, right? So I hope that you're encouraged. I hope that you can't wait to read the rest of the book of Daniel. And let me tell you, as a little teaser, when we get to chapter 9, which I'm going to do a video on next week, you are going to be astonished at the precision of the prophecy, which points not only to Jesus, but to the time of his triumphal entry. So please come back next week and join me for next week's video. Go to the website injesusname.net and you'll be sure to get that video sent directly to you. And please share this video. It really helps to get the word of the Lord out there so people all around you can know that this Bible was written by God and that everything he says is going to come true, including Jesus coming back to rule the world in peace and mercy and grace forever and ever and ever. So I just thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. It's in Jesus' name I'm doing it all. Bye now.